those type of things.
And that's is that a higher level of force than OC spray?
Yes.
And once a person tries to disarm an officer of his taser, and they have been fighting over it for over 2.5 minutes, and once the officer makes a decision or is in fear of serious bodily injury, is he entitled to use deadly force?
If the situation is there, yes.
And once the officer makes the decision to use deadly force, is he required to go back down and try every lower level of force?
No.
Why not?
Because it's not reasonable. We keep saying that term, reasonable. It's not reasonable to expect, if I've exhausted other options of force in my escalation and they've been unsuccessful, how could we possibly expect them to go back down that ladder and try again? They've demonstrated that it's been ineffective for a myriad of reasons, but it's been ineffective. Why should they have to go back to lower levels of force?
Are you aware of the Kent County Prosecutor's Office ever charging a defendant with resisting and obstructing after a foot chase?
I am, yes.
And did the office take the position that the defendant should be let go because the officer created a dangerous situation?
No.
Are you aware of the Kent County Prosecutor's Office deeming that running away?
I'm gonna have to object. This is what the relevance is on every other case that we charge. We charge thousands of these, and so I don't see what the relevance is on what our decisions are in some unknown cases.
Your Honor, that's a position that this office has taken, that the Kent County Prosecutor's Office has taken previously. They've charged people for resisting and obstructing for foot pursuits, and the officers have engaged in foot pursuits to catch the person.
The other cases. So I'll sustain based on relevance, and it's outside the scope of cross as well, so.
He was asking about the foot pursuit policy and whether it's permitted, or if there is one.
But you're asking about a different policy of a different office.
Well, I'm asking if it's a crime to run away from the police, and if,
Is that what you're asking?
I mean, no, but I'm asking if it's a,
Yeah, so I'm sustaining the objection on the basis of what other cases, because we're not here about those cases. They're not relevant here.
okay. One moment, Your Honor. All right, no further questions.
Nothing for the guy.
I do see a couple of hands raised on the early, so I'll have my clerk coming back those questions for you. training simulations from start to finish in real time?
In like the average training scenario, I'm
I
assuming?
guess the context is that we saw the graduation video, for example, that showed a clip.
Yeah, so for,
But how long is the actual training simulation?
yes, Your Honor. So the example, that graduation video that had Officer Schurr's, a snippet of his time, those OC, where we expose them and have them do drills, that's probably roughly a minute and a half to 2 minutes by the time they work through. There'll be usually multiple dummies or stations or areas they have to complete exercises at. So, for example, that one's probably 2 minutes.
And the next is how often are those simulations required during training?
So the exposure happens while they're new hires, right? Sometimes when you, historically, if you go to become an instructor in that area, you get exposed or sprayed again or multiple times, or if you recertify in that. But for the average officer that isn't an instructor, that just participates in our training cycle, they don't get exposed to taser and pepper spray, but they do reality-based scenarios multiple times through the year, on a yearly basis.
And next is, in your opinion, since we're in Grand Rapids, are the GRPD GRPD policies and procedures meant to supersede the generally accepted police policies and procedures?
So that term, I know you've heard it a lot. It can be construed some ways. So our policies and procedures, our training calendars, those, the training calendar isn't published publicly, but our policies are publicly published. We are CALIA certified. CALIA is an international organization that accredits agencies. So they do a full review from top to bottom, training, policies, equipment, and I have to submit yearly reports based upon reviews. So they're a 5-year cycle that you're certified for the accreditation. We've been accredited since 2017, which puts us in the top 5% of all agencies in the United States, at least, for that. And then we've also had 2017, I believe it was, the 21st Century Policing. They came in, they did multiple work group meetings with community members, and all that, department members, all that, and reviewed our policies. I think Mr. Becker brought up, the exhibit had something from that 21st Century Policing recommendations. So we've had multiple reviews by accredited, national agencies or international accreditation agencies.
Okay, so that sounds like you're saying they're not meant to supersede, but.
Correct, and I think, my point with that is, those accreditation agencies wouldn't accredit you if your policies were out of norm. So, and again, policies that may, for example, say the Los Angeles Police Department may have a policy, may have a foot pursuit policy. What happens in Los Angeles doesn't equate to Grand Rapids, or doesn't make sense. So we pay attention to regional things much closer than on the national stage, because use of force laws are different in the state of Florida or South Carolina. Practices are different, right? Weather dependent, all these factors. So we have a ton of outside reviews. We've been accredited and reviewed and appraised by these organizations for our willingness to do that and open the doors, more or less.
Ms. Hampton, do you have any follow-up from those responses?
Just a few, Mayor. So, just to clarify, I think what you're saying here is that GRPD, even though some of those things are factors that are sometimes considered, GRPD policies supersede the national and generally accepted police practices as far as what your officers.
Actually, it's leading him, that is not what he said.
Can,
If you could, I'm gonna sustain that because it's not what his response is, and, if you could just rephrase your question.
can you clarify what governs how you evaluate GRPD's police officers' use of force? Whose
by
policies and
Our policies.
procedures?
And I would offer, our policies do coincide with generally accepted police practices.
And when you say that term, can you define what you mean by that? I mean, that's a very broad term, so what do you mean by that?
Yes, I would point back to the reviews we have by the CALIA, for example, the international organization. They would not offer accreditation to agencies that policies were outside of the norm or generally accepted police practices.
Right. I guess what standards are you evaluating GRPD's officers by? When you're conducting like a use of force evaluation, what do you look at within
One
GRPD?
policy, the training, is it consistent with training? Obviously, state and federal law, which our policies are derived from.
And it's GRPD's policies that are governing what the officer, or how you're evaluating a GRPD officer's conduct, right?
Yes.
One moment, Your Honor. No further questions, Your Honor.
I just want to follow up on the other question in terms of the length of your training. And you talked about the training with the exposure to the OC spray that we saw in the recruit. I guess generally, how long are your dynamic training situations when you do those after they become officers?
Sure. Just an average scenario could be anywhere from 30 seconds to several minutes. It depends on what the intent of the scenario is. But it's also, I want to clarify, it's difficult to recreate physically exhausting scenarios for the risk of injury to the officer and role players.
Yep, thank you.
And I think you touched on this a little yesterday. When you're doing the scenario-based training, like the videos you talked about, when the officers are actually fighting with another person, how long are those scenarios?
Those we specifically designed for, depending on the officer's physical ability or fitness level, 30 seconds to a minute and a half, depending on, because the risk of injury skyrockets when people are exhausted and that. So usually we can accomplish what we need to demonstrate that, usually within 30 seconds to a minute and a half.
Yes, I guess we'd like to have any other questions? And I do see one hand on the jury, so I'll ask my clerk to come and get that question from you. You can clarify, in your opinion, is deadly force appropriate in situations of active resistance or only in situations of active aggression? You can describe GRPD's policy.
Yes.
training.
Active resistance, you can't say always, but would most likely not lead to a deadly force incident. Becomes, it's a fine line between resistance and aggression. So, for example, grabbing a taser would be an aggressive act, and that would raise the level of force greatly. So, hopefully that answers that.
Okay, so is there a policy or training with respect to the appropriateness of deadly force in active resistance or active aggression?
Yes, in our reality-based scenarios, we'll create that position, so there's different force options, and they understand the difference of active resistance versus active aggression. And that's the whole purpose of why we train the way we do, so they have a conditioned response to those.
Thank you. Captain, any follow-up with that?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Jackson?
No further questions, Your Honor.
And I don't see any other hands raised. May this witness be excused?
Your Honor. Oh, I'm sorry. Please remind me.
Yes, Your Honor.
And you're okay with that?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Captain.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And defense may call your next witness.
We would call Chad McCursey.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And before you take your seat, will you please raise your right hand? My clerk will swear you in.
Do solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you. Be seated.
Thank you.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Ballard.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Sir, can you please state your name and spell your last name for the record?
My name is Chad McCursey. My last name is spelled M-C-K-E-R-S-I-E.
And sir, how are you employed?
I am a police captain with the Grand Rapids Police Department.
All right, so Captain McCursey, correct?
Captain McCursey, correct.
All right, and how long have you been employed with the Grand Rapids Police Department?
I have been employed as a police officer since January of 2000, so over 25 years now.
And could you just give me a brief synopsis of your experiences and positions over the years, please?
Certainly. I first started as an intern at the Grand Rapids Police Department in mid-90s, and then I got my college education, returned, and was hired as a patrol officer in January of 2000. I worked the road patrol for about 3 years, in the mainly in the South Service area. I then joined what we call the SRT, the Special Response Team, or the SWAT team. As a police officer, I did that for approximately 6 years. I left the SWAT team, went back to the road. I was chosen to become a community police officer. Joined the community policing team for about a year, and then I was promoted to sergeant. After I was a sergeant, I went back to night shift patrol as a night shift sergeant on the road. Did that for just a few months before I returned back into the SRT as a sergeant and team leader in the SWAT team. Did that for approximately 2.5, 3 years. In that time, I left and went into the detective unit. I became a detective sergeant, overseeing our general case team for about a year, and then moved into our family services team as a sergeant and ran that. Family services handles domestic violence, sex crimes, things of those nature. After that, I did a couple years there. I was promoted to lieutenant, and what we then joined, went back to the road as the watch commander. Our watch commanders or lieutenants run our road patrol shifts for the night and for the day during that. Was there for about a year and a half, then moved into our internal affairs unit. Was the commander of our internal affairs for 16, 17 months for the department, and then an opening became available in the training unit. We had at that